Welcome to Globalization Movements in Higher Education, a case study of Finland and the United States by Janine Kastner. This is a two-country comparative case study to examine the implementation of blended learning in higher education systems in Finland and the United States. The two nations provide different perspectives on the impact of globalization and how instruction is delivered in higher education settings. While both countries have high international ratings for higher education, there are many different perspectives and characteristics in the higher education systems. Based on Bray and Thomas frames of comparison, this analysis is grounded by reviewing political, cultural, and social characteristics of blended learning in higher education from a neo-institutional lens. The research questions seek to find answers to the influential factors to transition to blended learning approaches in higher education settings, and what are the commonalities and disparities in the implementation practices. Countries belonging to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, had an average college graduation rate of 35% for the first-time college students. United States graduation rate was 46%, and Finland rate was 44%. 12 of the countries had higher rates and 11 had lower rates than the United States. There are also many factors of dissimilarities between the United States and Finland. This study will discuss the population and economic factors that may cause limitations in this study. Differences and similarities in the academic standings and levels of higher education programs will be reviewed. The study will aim to discover if there are innovative practices through blended learning models that may increase the performance level and globalization efforts of higher education. The theoretical framework of neo-institutionalism and world culture perspectives help in explaining the expansion and convergence of blended learning in higher education in both the United States and Finland. This current educational trend of utilizing a combination of both traditional and online teaching is supporting the increased globalization of education and growing emphasis on providing improved access to higher education learning and experiences. When observed through an institutional lens, the researcher can review how practices have changed the way people access information without any delay. The neo-institutional lens to view this phenomenon examines the shared expectations and benefits of blended learning, which are emphasized more than the political aspects of transition. Through a comparison case study of higher education systems in the United States and Finland, an analysis of current trends in blended learning will be reviewed. This study will review statistics from PISA, OECD related to each system. Through an investigation of these factors, a comprehensive comparison will be made. The goal is to provide a deeper understanding about how these two countries implement blended learning in higher education system. This research study is guided by two research questions. What are common trends and approaches being used in blended online learning in higher education systems? What are the driving forces behind the development and implementation of these approaches? Are there any similarity behind these factors of influence? The researchers selected to review practices of blended learning in higher education systems in Finland and compare it to the United States, despite the fact that there has been a rapid worldwide expansion of higher education enrollment over the 20th century using this approach. Finland and the United States are both economically developed countries which have experienced an increase in online and blended learning formats. Through analysis of literature, further insight into pedagogy, policy approaches, and practices that improve student outcomes is revealed. Globalization has resulted in the necessity for changes in how the higher education community thinks of itself in the global context and in how it shares problems and collaborates in search for solutions. This globalization process has helped guide higher education institutes to develop new programs and pedagogy based on the international influences. In alignment with the global demands to prepare students for their future experiences and to increase international learning in higher education, a more integrated, integral use of technology, flow of knowledge, and overall values and ideas are developing. Education is seen internationally on many levels as a major contributor to overall wealth and economic prosperity. These influences have created a need for continuous improvement in order to maintain global connectedness in the educational systems. According to Held et al., 1999, the higher education systems are being transformed by globalization. This is increasing interconnectedness in how students are taught, access information, and connect. Higher education systems are a network of information which is shared and transferred between nations. These changes have led to an increased practice of blended learning in higher education. Blended learning increases educational opportunities by removing any barriers. Nicole and Lee believe that though the delivery of instruction through technology, boundaries between education and work are open, an increase in access to higher education is established, and any barriers to accessing higher education are removed. The internet allows students to instantly participate in discussions, to share their thoughts and work. These discussions and opportunities were previously not accessible, but now are open network of connections and resources. Blended learning creates a barrier-free educational environment. The demand to change the structures of higher education to increase opportunities is very overwhelming right now. There is an overall recognition that higher education is a major contributor to economic status. Consistent with these perspectives, the Finnish Ministry of Education set an objective to make the higher education system more international. Similarly, in the United States, there is a growing demand and increased implementation of online blended learning practices. Findings from the study, Learning on Demand, Online Education in the United States, reveal that online enrollments have continued to grow at a fast rate, far beyond any signs of decline in these rates. This study also revealed that there is no set approach to provide faculty training and professional development to implement these new practices. In the 1990s, Finland was considered the leading informational society. The Finnish government and Ministry of Education helped support this movement by providing a significant amount of money to assist Finnish education institutes to use technology in a way to prepare their students for digitalization growth in our world. These financial investments led to the use of educational technologies in teaching in Finnish education classes. Universities in the United States continue to seek alternative ways to increase enrollment. With the rise in costs for higher education, Americans are looking for alternate ways to obtain degrees. These costs are significant, often resulting in years of debt and financial burden. Blended learning was influenced in the United States because of financial challenges and the decline in higher education enrollment. In the United States, each of the individual 50 states is responsible for governing public colleges and universities. These universities enroll about 75% of the student population in higher education. The federal government does not govern these institutions, but the degree of control by the states varies. Higher education uses a credit to measure academic progress. This allows for mobility because the credits can be transferred between Americans' universities and colleges. There are 5 types of degrees in the United States. Undergraduate degrees include an associate's or bachelor's. The graduate degrees include a master level, professional certificates, and doctoral degrees. The higher education systems in Finland consist of universities and universities of applied sciences. The universities provide scientific degrees at bachelor, master's, and doctoral levels. Non-degree earning adult education classes are also available to develop skills, interests, and trades. Different levels of comparison are included in this case study to identify the influences in shaping educational outcomes and higher education graduation rates. Within this system, disparity is presented between funding, curriculum, and college completion. OECD data reveal comparable graduation rates for Finland and US. Both countries are about 10% above the OECD countries. In both countries, females had a higher graduation rate than males. Finland and US have disparity in survey of adult skills, specifically performance of 16 to 65-year-olds in numeracy. US performed below the OECD average and Finland was above. Programs for international assessment of adult competency, PIAAC, is a way to measure adult competencies. Finland's average skills for adults is one of the highest in comparison to other countries participating in this assessment. Comparing U.S. adults with their peers in Finland revealed various comparisons in performance by educational levels. On the Measuring Up report card, U.S. ranks number 7 in the percent of young adults enrolled in college in comparison to other OECD countries with 34%. Finland ranks number 9 with 32%. The U.S. ranks number 15 when looking at percent of certificates and degrees awarded to students enrolled in college with 18%, and Finland ranks numbers 27 with 13%. Based on OECD, spending on education is significantly higher in the U.S. compared to Finland. U.S. has an average of 65.3% on private education spending, while Finland has an average of 3.5% on private education spending. In contrast, Finland's percent of spending on public education is 96.5% and U.S. is 34.7%. The Bologna Process in Europe is focusing on the higher education systems as a way to expand opportunities for mobility across borders, maintaining academic records according to shared protocol, and engaging in quality assurance measures according to shared overreaching standards. This approach to unifying and increasing mobility is a stark contrast to the United States system of higher education. Many universities in the United States have higher tuition rates for out-of-state residents. This creates barriers to expand opportunities due to financial implications, which discourage mobility even within the borders of the United States. Through the Bologna Process, European countries are moving towards a more universal approach to higher education without borders, while the United States continues to limit and restrict mobility through financial requirements. With the increase of tuition rate, it is concerned that the U.S. higher education system may not continue to thrive and compete internationally. The trends and patterns present include a practice that is still under development and often referred to as emerging. Both in the United States and Finland, professional development efforts are underway in the practices of blended learning. The research indicated a different approach in these nations about professional development and its focus when training people to implement blended learning practices. While the approach is different, the current goals are the same in both Finland and the United States. It is to gain a better understanding about the instructional practices and technological aspects of blended learning. For both countries and other countries around the world, this is a newly researched and developing approach to teaching. Both countries have identified the value in this approach and are developing practices through recent research and information. The redesign of efforts and challenges are presented in both countries as they seek to find ways to transition from traditional teaching to blended learning. For the U.S., the main influential factor of blended learning appeared to be money and time. The cost of higher education is significantly reduced when offering online courses. Additionally, as more and more adults are juggling many different obligations, blended learning offers increased opportunities for these adults. In Finland, with the flexibility and accessibility of open universities, this nation focus on blended learning appears to be on uniformity and a decreasing geographical barriers through the use of technology. If the education system was uniform through universal online blended courses and more effective outcomes were aligned to curriculum standards and objectives, then the way in which higher education is taught would be more globalized. This would eliminate any disparities in higher education systems internationally. Standardized and research-based approaches to blended learning and the ways in which institutions support students to produce optimal learning are still being developed. According to Gaston in 2011, the United States should consider the strongest elements of the Bologna Process while maintaining values that contribute to distinguish higher education in the United States. It is evident that social, economic, and technological changes affect all aspects of our life, including higher education. Blended learning is a breakthrough in this country which is changing the way we educate and provide higher education courses.